All right, Sarah. Sarah, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
I'm originally from Boulder, Colorado, um, and I grew up there until I was about 9, and then moved to California with my dad and family.
Tell me about your relationship with your parents.
Um, well, I'll start with my mom because she passed away in 2014. Um, Her and my dad were married when they were 19. It was actually an arranged marriage. She's originally from Guyana, and she was studying in Saudi Arabia, actually on a scholarship she got when she was 16, and she was extremely intelligent. And she left my dad when I was 5 years old, and things got extremely complicated after that. Um, yeah, my relationship with my dad is at this point is it's non-existent. I mean, last year I saw him after my grandmother, his mother, passed away, and I did have a talk with him about some of the stuff, but I asked him to just kind of leave me alone. Um, and he asked for forgiveness, but like I just didn't really feel that it was meaningful, or that he actually that he wanted to have a conversation about it. It was more just like, he just wanted me to forgive him for religious purposes and kind of move on and like not have to think about it. And I didn't think that was fair. And so I just told him that I needed him to leave me alone and give me my space. And I haven't talked to him since then. And actually, it's been like, it's been a bit freeing, and not having to think about it is nice. Not having to think about him.
Tell me what was going on with your dad when you were young.
Um, when we were young, okay, my dad joined a cult when I think I was still a baby. And, growing up in it, that's not like how we defined it, obviously. I grew up mostly with my dad. When my mom left, she was basically kind of labeled as a devil, for leaving the group and for like wanting to have a life outside of the group. She wanted to become a nurse, which she did. She went to nursing school, and she became a stewardess. And at first, like, we kind of saw her on the weekends, and then it got less and less. And then my dad like remarried twice, and I was basically separated from my mom a lot of my childhood, most of my childhood. He thought that again, she was evil, and that she would influence me. So I spent a lot of time thinking about where she was, but not really able to see her. So I grew up mainly with my dad until I was about 12 years old.
What kind of cult was it?
It was a Sufi cult. Um, I'd rather not say the name, but it was a Sufi cult. They're international. They started they started a larger group here in the United States, in California, and my dad was a big part of that. That's kind of why we moved to California. So like the there's a grand sheikh internationally, and then there was a sheikh that was appointed here to the United States, and he started the group in Palo Alto. I think it was like around 1990 or something like that. And it, kind of on the outside of it, people would get drawn in because it was like meditative, and it was all about love. Like, it's like religion equals love, and love is God, and so you just have to, follow that path. And so people kind of got hooked on that, and they have what they call like, weekly dhikrs, where they do chanting, kind of. So it falls in the vein of like Rumi and Sufism, and so they did like a lot of chanting, and inside of that structure, there was another structure. There was a bit of a hierarchy, and the more money that people had in the group, the more status that they had within the group, and the closer they were to the sheikh, and like basically that guaranteed their place in heaven, depending on how much, money that they gave, and basically whatever. If you did not have money, then you had to give something else, whether it was like working, whether it was, you had to dedicate yourself in some way, right? And so there were a lot of people there working for free. My dad helped to build that group. He helped build their online presence. And he was a software engineer, and dedicated most of his free time to, building that group and being kind of like the sheikh's right-hand man. I think maybe he didn't have as much money as the other people, but he did have a lot to offer as far as his work ethic, and he had a vision that he wanted to see this group succeed, and he was very dedicated to that.
What do you think was really behind this cult, this religion?
Like everything else, money. Yeah. Money, power, money and power. I think those were the main motivations for the cult leader and his family, and I've seen that to be true after many, many years of like processing this. Obviously, when I was a child, I just, I was told very strictly to just obey, not question. Basically like the sheikh was considered to be like a descendant of the prophet. So like he could do no wrong. His family could do no wrong, even if they were abusive towards us, even if they did bad things, like, God would look the other way. And if they did bad things to us, then that was our fault.
And the sheikh was from what country?
I don't know if I want to talk too much about that.
Okay. And this went on in your childhood for how long?
I was, for most of my childhood until I left. Yeah.
And you left when?
I left when I left my ex at 23 years old. My mom left my dad, and she never believed in this group, and she thought it was a cult. And I think, she tried to tell my dad that, even though she had also an Islamic background, but she grew up with it. It wasn't like an identity crisis for her. I think they just had very different views on religion. And she was a free spirit. She became an atheist. So.
What kind of things did you go through as a young girl, being involved in this?
I guess there's layers. Okay, so there was my relationship within my family, which was problematic, and then there was the relationship with the group itself. And so within my family, my dad remarried twice. Like I said, the first wife that he married, she was extremely abusive to me and my brother. I had two brothers, and my mom used to see us occasionally at that point, and she would drive from Boulder to Colorado Springs to pick us up like every other weekend. And, you know, I want to say I was about 5, and she came and picked me up one time, and I was like kind of bent over, and my brother was not doing too good either. And she pulled up our shirts and just saw like a lot of bruises. And she immediately took us to the police station and reported it. And because of that, like, I think my dad had to get a separation from that woman. And I feel like my dad blamed us because of that, because he had to get a separation from her. And then we didn't see our mom as much, and my dad decided to remarry again. And he one day he just picked us up from school in a big van, and he was like, "We're going to New York." And again, I probably was like, I want to say 7. I can't quite remember. I was probably around 7. And we drove across the country to New York, where the Grand Sheikh, like the Sheikh from International, came to visit in the U.S. And it was like a big deal for the group. A lot of the followers were going to be there, and my dad wanted to be there, and he got married there to a woman who had 5 children, my stepbrothers and sisters. And at first it was like really exciting, because like I got brothers and sisters, and it was like, oh, this is going to be awesome, like I just remember when we first met, my brothers and sisters, who I'm still like super close with most of them, we were jumping on the bed, and it was fun. I was having a good time, it was like a really fun time that I remember. And then we drove back to Colorado Springs, and that's really when things got extremely, extremely abusive in my dad's household. He, at that point in time, the Sheikh in the U.S. was not here. It was like there was a small group in New Mexico, and there were different folks that were a part of this group, and it was pretty insular, and that they had like their own school for the kids and things like that. But anyways, my dad was connected closely with this group. We would go visit New Mexico quite a bit, and I think he connected with some guy out there, and he also had stepkids. And I don't know, man, it seemed like maybe they were into like torturing kids or something, but my dad just became extremely, extremely abusive. We didn't see my mom during that time at all. Like, she tried to come and see us one time, and I just remember her coming to the house, and she was yelling outside, "I want to see my kids, I want to see my kids." And I was at the window, like, the second floor, and I was looking down, and I really, really, really wanted to see her so bad. I hadn't seen her in so long, and I was crying, and then she threw a rock at the window. She broke it because she wanted to see us, and my dad called the cops, and she had to leave. And after that, I feel like I was blamed in some ways. Like, why were you crying for your mom? I just remember being asked that, and my brothers and I were really punished after that. And it was like this narrative of that, my mom was a really bad person. She was the devil, and she was influencing me somehow. And because of that, I needed to be punished. So basically, my brothers and I were isolated from the rest of the family. We were put in our own room. We were basically accused of anything that went wrong in that house, and there was like 9 kids in the house. And so we were just constantly being abused by my dad. Food was used as punishment. We were basically deprived of food one time for a whole week. Physical abuse, belts, I just remember just living in just constant fear of
Why did your mom not try to Was your mom powerless?
I guess my mom, after she, after she threw that rock or whatever, I don't know. I just know that I didn't see her.
Did you feel abandoned by her?
I think I told myself that my mother loved me because my dad often told us that she left because she didn't love us. And so I knew that he was lying about that. And I knew that my mom loved me. I just didn't know where she was. I guess I probably did feel abandoned by her. I don't.
It sounds like you might have been confused, no?
Yeah, I was confused. I wanted to see her very badly, of course. And I mean, his divorce was obviously not easy on me. And I really wanted to see my mom. I wanted to be with her. I did not want to be with my dad. He just turned into like an extremely mean person, and that was not who he was like earlier on. But then he just like turned into this like really extreme sadist. I felt like he was a sadist. I mean, it was just very. It was like there wasn't just no emotion with him, and like it was just. I just was constantly afraid of him. And so things kind of went on that way. There were a couple times where I was like trying to talk to my brothers to see like, could we run away? Between the ages to seven to like 8 to 9, which is when we left Colorado. I was just trying to I think I was just trying to survive. But I did try to, we did try to run away. We got caught and then we got in trouble again for that. One of my teachers at school, I'll never forget her. She called me one time and just like during a recess, she said, "Can you come and talk to me?" And I sat down with her and she was like, "What's going on at home?" And I told her, and I think she probably called CPS or something. And I just remember getting in really big trouble after that as well. And in 1990, like right at the beginning of 1990, we ended up moving to California. My dad got a job out here in the Bay Area, and all of us moved. And at first I thought, oh, maybe the abuse is going to stop, but eventually it just continued. And finally, when I was about 9, 10, I was sent to live with like various people in the group, and finally with my grandparents. But during that time when we were in California, the group became a really significant part of our daily lives. So we would either be at my dad's house school or at the what they called the durga or the masjid or the sheikh's house. So I was sent to live with my mom finally at 12 years old, and that was after spending a couple years with my grandparents. And at that point my mom was just she had become a pretty bad alcoholic. She was working as a nurse, but she was also drinking. She was a functioning alcoholic. It was great to be reunited with her. I loved her very much, but it was extremely difficult to live with her. And at school, it was kind of up and down. Junior high and my freshman year of high school, I decided like halfway through to really buckle down, and it was because of one person who told me that he thought that I could become a lawyer. And he was like, "You would be a great lawyer." And that kind of like really changed my worldview, because like up until that point, I don't think anybody had really told me that I could do something with my life. And so I kind of buckled down. I managed to pull up my grades. And that semester I had started seeing a boy. He was like, he played basketball, and I met him during a basketball game, and we were hanging out, and you know, it started to become like, you know, he was my boyfriend. My mom found out about it, and she told my dad. You know, she didn't really know too much about what happened when we were living with him, and maybe she thought like he needed to know. I don't know why, but he asked that my brothers and I go visit him that summer in California. So I was living with my mom in Denver, went to visit him for the summer, and right after getting off the plane, he basically told me like, you can't have sex outside of marriage. That's completely against the religion. You're gonna go to hell. He would go to hell. Like, you know, everybody in the family would go to hell. So that just wasn't allowed, and I had to get married. The sheikh was gonna pick who I was going to be married to, and that was the end of the conversation. So we came to Los Angeles for a conference, a religious conference that he had put together with, you know, the group, and it was pretty well attended, and it happened at the Westin Bonaventure. And one of the mornings during the conference, my dad told me to go talk to some guy who was sitting in the coffee shop. He was like 28 years old. I didn't know him, but he just told me to go over and talk to him. And I remember sitting down having a conversation. I just ordered a glass of orange juice, and I was just looking at my hands because we were basically like told not to look at guys. We couldn't look at them in the eyes. It took me a long time to be able to look a guy in the eyes. But I sat down and he just basically told me like, I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait for an engagement and a long engagement. I just want to get married. And I had been told most of my life that, you know, my role in the group and just generally speaking was, you know, to be a wife and a mother. We were not encouraged to think about school, think about careers, anything like that. And so I did what I have been told my entire life to do, which was to just obey and do as I was told. And I met him that morning, and I was forced into a spiritual wedding with him that night.
How old were you?
I was 15 years old, and he was 28, so he was 13 years older than me. In the state of California, that is considered to be statutory rape. I was not allowed to talk to my mom. I didn't have like a cell phone or anything at that time. We just had these little pagers, and I didn't have one. So that night, I was forced to marry him in a spiritual wedding ceremony. You know, nobody put a gun to my head. Nobody, you know, said, "Oh, this is like you have to do this, otherwise, you know, we're gonna like string you up and beat you." But they didn't have to do that to me. I was deathly afraid of my father, and I thought what I was doing was right. That's what I had been told to do my entire life. And so I thought, you know, what I was doing was right, and it was going to save me, and I was going to be a good person after that. And then they just physically handed me over to this guy. After that ceremony, and he was able to leave the country with me shortly after. He didn't rape me on my wedding night. He raped me the day after, and then continued to do so throughout the rest of our marriage. So I immediately was pregnant. He took me out of the country for about 6 months, where I did not speak the language. I didn't know anybody there, and I was just completely dependent on him. And so I think a part of me, I've struggled a long time with this, but I think a part of me just kind of turned off. And I just fully went into being a wife, and when I was about 6 months pregnant, we came back to the States, to the Bay Area, and we were legally married in Reno, Nevada, which is just a short 4-hour drive from where we were living. And in a drive-through wedding chapel, somebody, rubber stamped my wedding certificate. And at the time, all it took in Nevada, in the state of Nevada, was a permission slip from one parent that was notarized. I don't ever remember being asked if I consented, although even if I was asked, I probably would have said yes. Because at that point I was extremely traumatized. I was his property, basically.
You felt you were brainwashed?
Oh, I was definitely brainwashed.
Yeah.
My entire life. I mean,
That's what this
it's
is.
taken me years. It's taken me this long to unbrainwash myself, if you could call it that. But yeah, I'm like still dealing with the washing of the brain. But I'm sorry, where was I? So we were legally married in Reno, Nevada. The one thing that I do remember about that trip was that I really wanted to go sledding because, I had grown up in Colorado early and I missed the snow. And I just wanted to go sledding with my big ass pregnant belly. I wanted to go sledding, and we did. And I mean, that's where my brain was. Like I was a kid. I was definitely a kid still. What I didn't realize when I did legally get married is that I was signing all of my rights away.
So you were pregnant at the wedding?
I was pregnant. It was not a wedding. It was just a drive-through wedding chapel.
But you weren't supposed to be having sex before you were...
No, that they should have called the cops because that was clear evidence of a rape.
But according to the cult, you're not supposed to have sex before marriage?
Well, I was spiritually married at 15, right?
Oh, I see.
So in the eyes of God, that was perfectly okay. After my spiritual ceremony, that's when I was handed over to this guy. So for all purposes, for my dad, basically that was like, that was the real marriage. The formal wedding certificate was a way for any of them to get out of any type of charges: statutory rape, child sexual assault, kidnapping, all those things which they could have been charged with no longer applied the day that they stamped my wedding certificate. So up until then, I wasn't allowed to even really talk to my mom. I remember the day after my ex-abuser raped me, he stood over the phone and had me call my mom and lie to her and say that I was going to live with my dad now. I didn't want to live with her anymore. I mean, I still had all my stuff at her house. I never got to go back to my mom's house. I never got to go back to being a kid. That one night just took away my entire childhood. I could never... I guess I'm still looking for myself. So yeah, that was my wedding. That was my wedding story.
And that was, how old are you now?
I am 42.
42.
Still crying about this shit.
How did you get away from this?
It took me about 10 years. I ended up having 2 children with my ex, and I had my daughter when I was 16. And she literally changed my entire world. I just didn't know how I was going to leave, but I did know that there was something wrong. Slowly, I started to realize there was something wrong. I think what I had told myself for a long time was that, I was doing this to be a good follower, a good daughter, and slowly that started changing in my brain. I remember taking my daughter to the park one day and just seeing other kids my age walking to school and just thinking to myself, I want to go back to school. I want to be like those kids, And I asked my ex, and he said, oh, well, go ask the Sheikh's wife. So I went to ask the Sheikh's wife, and she basically just kind of put me down and said, no, you're supposed to be a wife and a mother. What is your husband going to feel like if you're working, or if you start going to school? He might feel like less of a man. Your place is in the home. And it was then at that point that I was just like, no, I didn't want to listen to her. And so I decided to disobey. And I started going back to school in Fremont Adult School, and I got my GED. And then I had to find my own child care. So
How far were you allowed to go to school before this all changed your life?
Before I was able to leave,
Yeah. No, before you got pregnant and married and all that.
I was allowed to go to school up until I got forced to marry.
Which is like 15?
Freshman year.
14.
I finished my freshman year of high school, and then I was taken out of school, which happens to a lot of victims of child marriage. They get taken out of school because they're now having kids. And so I couldn't go back to regular high school with a kid and everything.
You have 2 children now?
I have 2 children now, yeah.
And what happened to your kids?
They're with me. My kids are with me. They're in their 20s. Yeah, they're still with me. I'm trying. They're doing good though. And my daughter's in school for fashion. She's really into textiles, and my son he works in cybersecurity.
And their father is?
He's not in the picture. I mean, he is, but not really.
How were you able to pull yourself away from this? How many years were you?
So I went back to school. It took me 7 years eventually to leave him. I was 23. And by that time, I had gotten my associate's degree in culinary arts. I decided to start working as a chef. And I started working, and the first paycheck that I got, I'll never forget. I was like, I want to go out to dinner, and I'm gonna pay, because, our entire marriage, he was extremely abusive around money. Anytime I spent money, it was just long interrogations about what I spent money on and this and that, and very controlling around the money. So for once, I was like, oh, I have money. I'm gonna, take us out to dinner. I don't have to hear anybody telling me that I can't afford to pay this and that. And so we did that. And when we got home, he was very angry, which was pretty normal for him. But this time he was really angry, and I was done. And I just remember taking my ring off and throwing it on the ground, and I want a divorce. And he at first, I had just started working. I had never had a bank account. I just learned to drive when I was 22 years old. So I had to figure out, how was I gonna survive with 2 kids now? So he said, okay, I'm gonna take the kids, and you figure it out, and then I'll bring them back at the end of the summer. So he left with the kids, and I kept working. I rented a place, and I got them enrolled in school, and time came for the kids to come back home. He called me and said, the kids aren't coming back to live with you. I said, no way, that's not gonna happen, because that's what happened to me. And I did not want that to happen to my kids. So I called my brother. He lends me $800, traveled to get my kids, brought them back home with me, and I filed for divorce. That's when I started, that's when I started to live my life again. It took 3 years to get a divorce. It's a very extremely complicated family law, process. Anybody who's gone through a divorce will tell you that. As a minor, you can't even hire an attorney to get a divorce because you're a minor. You cannot go to a shelter. You cannot enter into a lease because in the eyes of the law, you are not considered an adult. Even if you're married, you become legally emancipated here in the state of California. However, that is not going to help you when you go into an attorney's office and you're like, I need to hire an attorney because I want to get a divorce. That attorney, I guarantee you 1,000%, because I did my master's thesis on it, will tell you, sorry kid, I can't help you. The family law system is not made for minors to navigate it. And so it creates extreme barriers for minors who want to leave their forced marriage. And so that is why now I advocate to change the laws. And it took me a long time to leave. It took me 3 years to get that divorce finalized.
Was there a fight?
Oh, there was a fight. He tried to assault and kill me during that divorce. That was the first time he had ever tried to kill me, and the last. And he came out because he had to hire an attorney. I didn't have the money to hire an attorney, so I went to the family. I went to legal aid, and they just helped me with the paperwork. So I didn't have any representation, but he did, and I took him to see my son's preschool while he came out for a visit, and on the way home he tried to throw me out of a moving vehicle. And I remember holding my phone in my hand, trying to call the police. He took my phone and threw it out the window. The kids were screaming in the back. And after that incident, I just never saw him alone again after that. And thankfully I didn't have to. I divorced him. It took me over 10 years to, I want to say, catch up to where my peers were, but I still don't ever feel like I will ever catch up, just because I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to be a lawyer. I had hopes and dreams for my life that were just completely taken away from me at 15 years old. And that's why I advocate to end child marriage here in the United States and internationally. It's an issue in the United States that people, they don't know about. Thank you. They think they think that child marriage happens. Well, they have a lot of ideas about what they think child marriage is. A lot of what I get is, oh, well, that just happens, in your culture, right? You were a Muslim, that happens to Muslims. No, it doesn't just happen to Muslims. It happens in all religions. It happens without religion. Women and girls are forced into relationships every single fucking day. You look around, women and girls are getting forced into all kinds of relationships, whether they like it or not. And the same goes for boys. There doesn't have to be religion involved. And in fact, people use religion to cover up this abuse. They use religion to cover up pedophilia. No religion in the world allows for pedophilia. That's ridiculous. My dad and his group hid behind their so-called religion, used it to their advantage to cover up the abuse of children, not just me. A lot of the girls, most of the girls my age, they were forced to get married to older adult men. The sheikh basically said, marry them young, marry them when they're virgins. He would, these guys would join the group, give money to the sheikh. Next thing you know, they're getting married to teenagers. So what do you call that? That's a trafficking ring. That's what that is. It took me this long to figure that out. It took me a long, long, long time to figure that out. It wasn't until 2017 when I was going back, 2014, back up to when my mom died. Because my mom, even though she was an alcoholic, even though she was definitely addicted to drugs, my mom loved me. She was the one adult in my life who loved me so much. Even if it was hard for her to take care of me, even if it was hard for her to be there for me, she was there when I really needed her. I was working as a chef and barely making ends meet. I called my mom and I told her I needed to change careers. I needed to go back to school. She said, bring the kids here and I will help you. You can go back to school. And that's what I did. I spent 2 years getting my paralegal degree. I started working for the county. That allowed me to have a stable job. And slowly, I started rebuilding my life. I went back to school. Again in 2016, after my mom passed away, she always told me, look, the time is gonna pass. Just finish your education, you know? You can do it. She always encouraged me, and she was the reason I really started going back to school and trying to finish my bachelor's degree. And in 2017, I was doing a research project for an English class, and I was thinking to myself, oh, you know, maybe I'm just like an anomaly. Maybe our group, it's an anomaly. This doesn't happen regularly to other kids, right? So I started researching this issue myself. I found out then in 2017, all 50 states allowed child marriage to happen. Basically, what most states do is they set the age at 18 and then they allow for exceptions. So California, as an example, has no age floor. You can get married here in California at 0 years old with parental consent and judicial review. Now, why aren't parental consent and judicial review not enough? It's not a high enough standard. Why? Because we know that children can get easily coerced, abused into a relationship by their parents, by their own family. So who's going to protect the kid? Then the kid cannot even leave the marriage because, again, they're not considered an adult under the eyes of the law. So they're now stuck in a marriage that they cannot escape. And I found out that at that time, all 50 states allowed it. And I was like so shocked. I couldn't believe what I was reading. And I found some nonprofit organizations that were doing work to create awareness that this is happening. I found out that it was happening frequently all over the United States. Why? Because it's allowed. It's legally allowed. It protects the abuser from any type of, legal repercussions. So, it protected my abuser from statutory rape charges, from kidnapping charges, from child sexual assault charges, you name it. He was protected. Who wasn't protected? Me. I wasn't protected. Not even when I filed for divorce was I protected. So, I reached out to this nonprofit, and they immediately got in touch with me and they said, we want to know more about your story, and would you be interested in talking about this publicly? Because, a lot of survivors, they have a hard time talking about this subject. It's extremely traumatizing. It's re-traumatizing, and we need folks to raise awareness of it. So I started working on the issue then. And basically what I do now is I work alongside nonprofit organizations. I testify at legislative hearings. There's one coming up in Washington State, by the way, anybody who's in Washington State. And I share my personal story so that people can understand what the abuses are that hide under child marriage, under these laws that are protecting abusers and exposing minors to all kinds of abuse. Minors who get married are 3 times more likely to be abused within their marriage. Domestic violence happens 3 times more. They are usually pulled out of school, and the landscape The people who this is affecting today in the United States are minors. They're minors who are girls being forced into marriages with adult men. And there's a lot of studies out there. I would urge everybody who is watching this to go out and do your own research. Find out what those numbers are. In your state, is it allowed? You know, can minors be forced into a marriage in your state? And I guarantee you, they probably can. Since 2017, 6 states have ended child marriage. 6 states. Because of the efforts of victim advocates, and because of the efforts of nonprofit organizations who have brought this to the attention of legislators in their states. And usually, you know, survivor advocates like me will come forward, share our stories in a public hearing, share our testimony, and people will be shocked and say, how could this happen? How could this happen here? But I'm telling you now, it's written into 46 states' laws. It does not, there are these laws on the books that are blatantly trafficking our minors. And it just has to change. It has to change.
So how difficult has it been for you to recover from what you went through as a kid, as a teen?
I'm still recovering from what I went through. I think recovery is not linear. It is a circular process. I started going to therapy after my mom died, and I've been in therapy on and off ever since then. But that is really what has helped me to give vocabulary to what happened to me, because for the longest time, even until today, I blame myself. I blame myself because that's what people told me growing up. They said I was a bad kid. They said I was a very bad kid. My entire life I was told I was a bad child, that I was evil, you know, because of who my mom was, because I asked too many freaking questions. I was just too dang curious, you know. I was a bad kid. That's what they told me. I believed it. I believed it up until today. Like, a part of me sometimes still believes it. And when I was forced to get married at 15, I thought it was my fault because I had a boyfriend. I knew that was wrong. You know, I was told my whole life, you can't even look at a man in their eyes. Imagine, you know, going to a basketball game with a boy, making out with him. You know, my dad, of course, assumed that I was having sex. I wasn't. He didn't even bother to ask me. But I was blamed. I was blamed for everything. That's my point, is that I was blamed for everything that happened to me, and I believed that story in my head. And that's what kept me quiet for so many years. That's what kept me from talking to the adults around me, because even going to the doctor, I remember when I was pregnant with my daughter, even going to the doctor, I was told, this is the story that you're gonna give, okay? And a part of me believed that story. And so in order to recover, you have to unravel that in your brain. And for me, I mean, there's lots of ways to recover, okay? There's not just one way to recover. You know, going for a walk is recovery. Getting your mind to focus and trying to work through that pain without drugs, without alcohol. You know, there was a time when I did start drinking, and I had to make that choice. Is this the path that I want to go down? Is this the path that I want to go down? I saw the end of that path. I saw my mom pass away from addiction. I see what it does to families. My own family, you know, a lot of people struggling with addiction because of what happened to us when we were kids. And if you let that pain just eat away at you, it will eat you up. That hate, that rage, whatever it is that you're struggling with, that will eat you. You have to get help for it. You got to process it. And as hard as it is to go through those emotions, I do it because I want to be able to connect with my kids. I want to have those conversations with them. I want to talk to my husband. He supports me so much. I want to be able to open up to him and talk to him about this stuff. It's not easy, but therapy has helped.
And you're doing a good job with your kids now.
Um,
Your kids are
I've-
living a very different childhood than you did.
My kids have grown up with a completely different childhood. They are very much in control of who they are. They know, they may not have it all figured out, that's for sure. But they definitely are their own people, and they're very unique. And I never, ever, ever wanted them to be exposed to anything like that. And they were a huge part of my reason for wanting to talk out about this. And even though, my kids have a hard time with this because, obviously that's their dad. And, it's hard for them to hear this stuff. But they're the reason I try to make this change. I love my kids with all my heart. I would do anything for them. And I want them to live in a better world. That's why I do this. So they're just my reason. They're my reason for everything. They're my heart.
Excellent. Sara, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Super interesting. Thank you.